watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. Our guest now is Todd Maisch, the President and CEO of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us again.
Great to be back.
We had you on earlier in the session to sort of make the case for some arguments as things were starting to happen. And then again with some labor groups as the Capitol bill was coming together. We want to revisit this big momentous session from the business perspective that you can provide and help get some insight into how all this happened. First of all, I want to get your input, your evaluation on the Capitol bill we've got, the $45 billion plan to, quote, rebuild Illinois. Your group had advocated for increasing the gas tax, the motor fuel tax that goes into the transportation fund, but phasing out the sales tax, which people also pay at the pump. You got part of that. You got the higher gas tax. You didn't get the elimination of the sales tax. How do you assess that?
We got a partial win on both. Now, we wanted 15 cents. It ended up at 19 and indexed, so it was a little bit higher than we were comfortable with, but it was in a range we could go ahead and support. The sales tax, again, was a partial win because at least the sales tax now is going to be dedicated to the road fund as opposed to the general revenue fund, which is everything from paying the light bill to paying Medicaid payments.
So you did get that diversion. It's no longer going to the state. It's going to road projects, transportation projects.
Again, just as a reminder, Illinois is one of the few states to put a sales tax on top of not only the price of motor fuel, but also on top of the gas tax, one of the very few. And the money didn't go to transportation. The money went to general revenue.
Right, so it wasn't going to the lockbox.
Now we're going to shift it over into general revenue, and we believe it will be lockboxed.
What gives you any assurance or any degree of confidence that that money from the sales tax, in addition to the motor fuel tax, that money will go to the lockbox?
A lot of lawyers said that it was already lockboxed with the passage of the lockbox amendment. So what now, by the time the legislature actually allocates it to the general revenue fund, we believe it'll be very, very clear. Anybody wants to challenge it, or if the legislature tries to move it back, there will be people that will be there protecting that money for roads and bridges and transit.
Very interesting. The Capitol bill, if you have a little downtime for reading, it's only 370-some pages, I think it is. And if you look at the way all this works, there's big pools and pockets of money. The Department of Economic Commerce and Opportunity can go in there and basically split that money up and put it into different grant pools, or it can allocate it to specific park districts for projects here, or some of that money goes into sort of vague categories like job growth and retaining or attracting businesses to areas that have like blighted or economic desperation.
Sure.
I'm paraphrasing, but is that an inroad for the business community to get some of that investment, some of those investment dollars to spur growth? What are some benefits here for the business community?
The most important thing is to not think of it as one capital bill, but really two. There's the dollars that are going to be allocated to transportation, modernization, and investment, and that's the bulk of the money. And that is going to be spent very formulaically. There may be some projects in there. Let's face it, it's the legislature. They tend to work some projects in. But most of that money is going to flow through a very professional, federally mandated process to make sure money is being spent how it should be. The second piece of it, though, is what we call vertical capital. It's separate. It's funded with completely different revenue sources, largely gaming. And that is one where you're going to see a lot of the pickleball courts being discussed, buildings for universities and such. So keep in mind that they're two separate capital bills. And it's really, when people want to go ahead and point to pork, it's almost all in the vertical piece.
Which is funded by gaming.
Which is funded by gaming.
Okay, but it's all still one big piece of the puzzle. Which businesses do you think, either industry types or specific businesses, would you pick as winners in this Capitol bill?
I think the trucking and my friends at UPS are probably the biggest winners because they're the ones that use the roads as their office. UPS will tell you the roads are our office.
Interesting. So they pay a high fuel rate too.
They do, and they did so willingly. So the trucking industry was proponents of the higher gas tax because they see the roads crumbling, the bridges crumbling. I think the farming community is also probably a big winner because a lot of the money on transportation flows down to those local township and county roads that farmers use to get their grain to market or their pigs to market. So they're big winners as well. Obviously, the people who are going to do the work are going to win as well. But we supported the capital bill for the end users who need to get product to market, as opposed to just the folks who are going to do the digging and the the laying of the asphalt.
All right, the businesses in your group, in the Chamber of Commerce, they rely on consumers, on customers. And those customers across the state are now going to have to pay twice as much at the pump. So how did you balance all that when you were making the decision to support the higher gas tax against the fact that the customers, the people who need cash in their wallet to be customers and shoppers at many of your businesses, how did you weigh that?
So the tax will go up by 19 cents. But what we really did is some simple math is how you arrived at 19 cents is we did looked at the CPI since the last time the gas tax was increased in 1990, and we are exactly where we were, the same buying power from 1990. So it hadn't been increased since 1990, went in effect 1991, and that's, that's a long time. So when you figure out inflation, it's worth exactly the same amount of money as it was in 1990.
And we heard Deputy Governor Christian Mitchell make that same point on this show 2 weeks ago, but still, for people who weren't paying that higher rate over the last 20, 30 years, they will start to now. And that will be something that comes out of their budget, and they'll have to plan accordingly. About $124 average for the average driver in Illinois a year. I want to move on to something else, and just what is your assessment so far of the governor as the executive of the state and as really the person who set the policy agenda here in Illinois? Is he a pro-business governor yet?
I would say the jury is still out. He's certainly made some real substantial movement over the last 3-4 days of session, no doubt about that. I think last time I was on, I talked about the difference between, the kind of people he was putting into state government, that they were, serious and talented people, and then his rhetoric of higher income taxes, higher minimum wage that small businesses are going to have a hard time, paying. And there was that gap. So it's really kind of a tale of two sessions and almost a tale of two governors over the last several months. He came out of the gate with a huge minimum wage increase that small businesses aren't going to be able to pay. Went straight to graduated income tax, but then at the end came around and said, you know what? Elimination of a lot of these taxes, a capital bill, a new economic development incentive that's really important for a lot of people. There it was, like, bam, surprised the heck out of everybody, and it's much, much more balanced assessment than it would have been, 2 weeks before the end of session.
And before we let you go, you mentioned the graduated with the progressive income tax. You tried to beat that in the legislature. Speaker Madigan and Senate President Cullerton and Governor Pritzker got it through with enough votes, Democratic votes, to allow that question on the ballot in 2020. How does that fight change for you now that you're no longer speaking with legislators? That's done. You're now engaging the public, I presume. How does that argument change for you?
The campaign has begun. There are other groups that have been running ads already. We'll be energizing the grassroots, which mean local chambers, talking about the impact on small business, talking about the impact on entrepreneurs, talking about the impact on wealthy individuals that can move to Florida and avoid it altogether. We'll be talking very aggressively about that. I imagine we'll be running some ads and such. The Democrats, frankly, gave us a little bit of a gift of time because our arguments take a little while to make. And they've given us a full, almost extra year to go ahead and make those. I think we're going to defeat it. I'm predicting defeat today.
You did predict a defeat in the legislature, too, though. I just want to point that out. You're 0 for 1 right now on this graduated.
I predicted that it wasn't going to get called. I didn't think that Speaker Madigan would give us that extra year, so it was different. I did not predict defeat. I predicted that Madigan would not call it for the very reasons I'm talking about.
Very interesting. We will stay tuned as this public debate happens and it progresses over the months and really the year to come. Todd Maisch from the Chamber of Commerce, thank you for joining us. We're back in a moment.